A 29-story machine, loaded with volatile propellants, vanishes in a second. This is Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket, erupting into a massive fireball, turning years of engineering into a pillar of black smoke. The official response was quick and measured. Blue Origin labeled the event an anomaly during a routine test, emphasizing that no personnel were harmed. It was framed as a standard, if unfortunate, part of the development process. But the timing of this failure reveals a deeper crisis. This explosion forces a full evaluation of NASA's 2028 Artemis mission, putting the timeline for America's return to the moon at risk of delay. This catastrophe exposes the vulnerability of NASA's master plan. By outsourcing the hardware of human spaceflight to warring private billionaires, the agency has tied the national agenda to the volatile success of corporate test flights. Only 48 hours earlier, Blue Origin was riding a wave of momentum. NASA had just awarded the company a $188 million contract to land rovers on the lunar surface. The specific rocket was being prepped for a mission closer to home. It was scheduled to carry 48 Amazon satellites into orbit as part of Project Kuiper, Jeff Bezos' plan for a global broadband network. This launch was a tactical strike against Elon Musk and his Starlink network. Blue Origin was moving to break SpaceX's grip on the market. Instead of reaching orbit, the rocket burned to the ground. In a rivalry defined by speed, Blue Origin's ambition was physically halted by the limits of its own hardware. The explosive failure highlights the risks of this competition. Extreme market pressure is forcing these firms to compress decades of aerospace development into a few years, pushing experimental systems to a breaking point. Following the blast, Jeff Bezos attempted to soften the blow. He posted to social media, writing Reddit was a very rough day, but vowing to rebuild and get back to flying. But dismissive labels like anomaly ignore the severity of the event. This wasn't a flight failure. It happened during a hot fire test, a basic procedure to ensure the rocket can survive its own power while still on the ground. Imagine taking a hypercar engine and revving it to its absolute redline while the car is anchored to the pavement. You are intentionally straining every component to see if the machine disintegrates under its own force. During this test, extreme thermal conditions caused a critical engine to fail. When internal heat exceeds a threshold, the casing ruptures. Because a rocket is a pressurized tower of fuel, a single failure at the base triggers a cascade, compromising the entire 29-story vehicle. Reusable heavy-lift rockets are the key to making space exploration affordable. But these designs operate at such extreme physical limits that even a minor thermal deviation can lead to a total loss of the hardware. While Blue Origin deals with the fallout, SpaceX is demonstrating a very different level of flight readiness. The same week New Glenn exploded, SpaceX completed a successful test of its Starship rocket, achieving a controlled splashdown in the Indian Ocean and hitting nearly all of its mission objectives. This consistent flight data is solidifying SpaceX's financial position. The company is now moving towards an IPO that could see its valuation climb into the trillions. This creates a massive bottleneck for Blue Origin. After a decade of development and billions in investment, they are still struggling to get their heavy lift vehicle through basic ground testing. This setback reinforces SpaceX's position as the primary partner for NASA's moon missions. With New Glenn grounded, the competitive landscape has narrowed, leaving the government with fewer options for its lunar infrastructure. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman publicly downplayed the explosion, stating the agency would work with Blue Origin to evaluate near-term mission impacts. However, if the hardware cannot survive a static test while anchored to the ground, we have to ask what the actual safety margins are for human flight. The explosion suggests our current reliance on these volatile, reusable systems might be premature. We are committing to these designs before the hardware has proven it can handle the basic stresses of ignition. Blue Origin now faces a mandatory FAA mishap investigation. This process will ground their entire fleet and stall their satellite launches while investigators search for the root cause of the engine failure. NASA is now feeling the pressure of its own strategy. By relying on private firms for its most critical lunar landers, the agency has lost direct control over its own mission schedule. Over the next year, NASA must reckon with this hardware failure, while China continues its steady progress toward a 2030 moon landing. The 2028 Artemis launch date now faces a singular point of failure. Without a functional New Glenn rocket, the mission loses its secondary lander provider, leaving NASA with no backup if SpaceX faces its own delays. In the 1960s, the Apollo program was a massive government undertaking. Today, the moon mission is a gamble placed on the rivalries of two billionaires. This failure alters the power balance of the new space race. It proves that when private hardware fails, it doesn't just stall a corporate project, it stalls the geopolitical goals of the entire nation.